Hello and welcome to APAP NYC 2022 conference. Please welcome the chair of APAP's board, Renae Williams Niles.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I want to also say welcome to the 2022 APAP conference. I am coming to you from Culver City, California, unceded lands of the Gabrielino Tongva, Gabrielino Kizh, and it is such a joy to be here with you. As mentioned, I am Renae Williams Niles, and I'm the Chief Content and Engagement Officer with the Los Angeles Philharmonic, but I am also proudly serving as the APAP Board Chair. It is such a thrill to have you all here, to have us together. You, all of us, are APAP. We are extraordinary, and the work we all do together is essential. It is inspiring and powerful that we are all continuing to find ways to do our work through what has been unfathomable challenges and also learning from the past 2 years. I actually attended my first APAP conference in 1994. I'm very proud of that. And I have actually relished every conference since then. Every time and any opportunity we all have to meet, to drink, to experience performance, and to also make touring, performing, and community engagement possible. Of course, like many of you, I was incredibly looking forward to being together in person, to hugging and seeing and having that in-person connection. I even bought a new pair of boots to mark the occasion. But since that is not possible, I am so very grateful that we can all meet here. We can still meet, we can still reunite, and we can still do our work. As you can imagine, the decision to forego the in-person gathering was a difficult one. We were certainly bound for a very successful in-person as well as virtual conference, but it was the safest decision for us all to make. The APAP staff, like many of you, have once again turned on a dime to transform this event practically overnight and has worked tirelessly to ensure community and productivity. Our business, our mission is all about connection and being together this week, however virtual, we hope provides a source of strength, affirmation, and discovery. I look forward to meeting many of you in the chat during the sessions, to sharing the excitement about what we have heard and what we've learned. I can't wait to bump into you in the virtual Expo Commons, to also party with you during the APAP hours. Yes, APAP hours. This is our opportunity to connect with our art, with business, and with each other. And from now until Saturday, as well as beyond, APAP is providing multiple ways for all of us to accomplish just that. I want to say thank you to my fellow APAP board members for your unwavering commitment, and to the APAP staff for continuing to go above and beyond. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce the most extraordinary president and CEO of APAP, Lisa Richards Toney.
Thank you, Renae. Thank you so much for that generous introduction. Greetings, APAP. It is my distinct honor to serve as your president and CEO, and I am pleased to welcome you. You made it. We made it. Through registration, the change from online, the change to online, and you got on Swap Card. Thank you for pushing through with us. We are here. And I want to remind you, we have been for 65 years. We were strong yesterday. We are today, and we must believe tomorrow. At this time, I'd like to recognize and express deep gratitude to the best board a girl could ask for, the APAP Board of Directors, chaired by Renae Williams Niles. Thank you for your stellar leadership, your example, and commitment to supporting this organization is admired by many, our members, our staff, our field. We appreciate you. And to our sponsors, thank you for sticking with us and believing in APAP, in our brand and our purpose. We appreciate your support. Diamond Quimby presents Women of a Certain Age, the musical. ETICS, Rodney Marsalis, Philadelphia Big Brass. Cami Music, IMG Artists, Opus 3. Prism.fm, Rhizome Arts Consulting. Everybody In, Nobody Out by Ken Fisher, University of Michigan Press. Folk Alliance International, the New York City Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. Now, please enjoy this video from our sponsor, Rodney Marsalis, Philadelphia Big Brass.
The Rodney Marsalis Philadelphia Big Brass is America's premier large brass ensemble. A group that always reflects the diverse makeup of men and women in the American culture. The Rodney Marsalis Philadelphia Big Brass is dedicated to the notion that music is a gift to be enjoyed by everyone. The Rodney Marsalis Philadelphia Big Brass is a family-owned and operated business that had its beginnings on the streets of New Orleans. On the advice of family patriarch Ellis Marsalis, the group created a concert format that breaks the usual barriers between genres and strives to connect the audience and performers. A veritable dream team of virtuoso brass players, the group burst onto the music scene with a debut performance in Philadelphia's Kimmel Center in Verizon Hall, a residency for the Mann Center for the Performing Arts, and a special feature on the National Public Radio show All Things Considered. The group has performed sold-out concerts in prominent performing arts centers throughout the United States, South America, Asia, and Europe. Performances by the Rodney Marsalis Philadelphia Big Brass range from solo trumpet to septet to the full 11-piece ensemble. Their programs include holiday concerts, mini concerts for schools, and traditional brass concerts with optional organ or choir. Brothers on the Battlefield, The Power of Love is a healing and joyous multimedia concert that covers music from the Civil War through the civil rights movements.
Thank you. I'd also like to recognize an additional sponsor, AMS Planning and Research. Thank you all for your support. Where would we be without the generosity of our funders? They have answered the call, and their commitment to APAP and our vision for serving you is inspiring. Thank you, funders. Thank you to the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. Thank you to the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation. Thank you, the Wallace Foundation. Thank you, the National Endowment for the Arts. And thank you to the APAP board members and the APAP board alumni. Truly, there is a lot to be grateful for. But like many of you, I have been feeling a little conflicted and questioning. However, as I prepared for today and knowing that while I couldn't be in person with you and give you all hugs, I accepted that it was my duty to carry on and with my head held high. Why? Because we made it this far. Almost 2 years into the pandemic, and we are still here. That is a victory in itself. Sure, we've had our setbacks, and it feels like so much is still unraveling. But we are not in the same place as before, and we won't stop. We carry on, we pivot again. This is all starting to sound like a bootstraps kind of story, and that's so out of fashion. We can't just keep going without sustenance, without nourishment. Before you settle into what will be your conference experience, I invite you in this moment to pause and to go deep, deep inside yourselves and ask, what sustains me? Is it your work, your family, your faith, your passions? What does your quiet prayer reveal? Over the winter holidays, just as the spread of Omicron was taking hold and the reality of this difficult yet necessary decision that I had to make of canceling the in-person gathering was starting to set in, I intentionally reflected on what is sustaining me. With so much coming at me, at us, it was an essential wondering, pondering, a prayer. For me, I rediscovered the teachings of Maulana Karenga's African American cultural holiday, Kwanzaa. There are 7 principles in the celebration of Kwanzaa, which are mirrored in almost every spiritual tradition. What I kept coming back to in my reflection is the concept of unity, umoja, that brings us together and that which is primary to achieving anything worthwhile. And if we are to survive what we are facing today, we must work as a collective. I also reflected on the strong sense of self-determination, Kujichagulia, it will take to weather this storm. While it's easy and quite plausible to lose sight and courage, our cultural traditions remind us that we weren't built to just give up. Instead, we open our arms to the welcoming embrace of our communities. And doing so, we are reminded that it is okay to need one another. It is a good friend or colleague who can remind us of who we are and why we are worth fighting for. It is, in essence, an act of call and response from the African griot storytelling roots of performance. If I call, I need you to respond, and it works both ways. In doing so, we demonstrate our care for one another. The collective work and responsibility, Ujamaa, is the way forward. Take, for instance, the great advocacy wins of 2021, where we, all of us, we taught the SBA about the mightily diverse performing arts ecosystem, and we showed them that we are brave enough to fight for the economic recovery that will give us a chance at the financial stability we deserve. The more than $16 billion in relief was motivating, and for many, the boost needed to hold on with purpose. Nia. And here we are again, asking the deep questions as we scaffold forward to claim our destiny as creatives, Kumba, not simply artists or arts workers, but creatives, creators, visionaries for the future, yet to be determined. So I ask and I invite you to spend the next few days committing to nourishment. For some, it will be the friendships, some a boost in confidence, and for many, the sense of reclaiming your mojo, and for all of us, our faith. So, as you can see, I wasn't on the couch reading Managing Arts Organizations in a Time of Crisis and taking notes in the margins. That would have been good too. Instead, I went deep inside myself. I called upon the cultural traditions that nourish me, bringing all of me and you bringing all of you is now what this moment is about. And really, it's the only way. I invite you to take this week to not just steady yourselves in artistic purpose, but show up to our table open to nourishing that which will feed the other parts of you as well. Some of what we may offer may be just what you were looking for, and some might not be what you thought you needed. But our conference committee, comprised of the diverse and multifaceted membership that you are, knew what we, the collective, needed. And together with the APAP team, I have put my faith in their inclinations, their wisdom and guidance, and we have all dreamed up this conference. Thank you to the 2021 APAP Conference Committee co-chairs, Mark Balin, Allie Haynes, Penny Maria Jackson, and Rosalba Rolone, and the full committee. Working with a committee this large, over 30 individuals, presenters, agents, managers, artists, we made a commitment to make space for our diverse needs as a membership and a field. In doing so, we prove that we really are stronger together. Coming together as we are here today is comforting. Seeing your hellos and the digital hugs in the chat remind us of the good times together, the cherished moments of wonder and of growth. It's nourishing on a cellular level. There are rituals in practically every cultural tradition the world over that bring its people together. And when we come together, it's only fitting that we also remember and honor those within our community who have left the physical realm and who are now our ancestors. I invite you to join me in the African ritual of pouring libation to invigorate the spiritual connection to our colleagues and friends who are now ancestors. We salute and give thanks to them, to the enrichment that they brought to our field, to our lives, and the cover they now leave us with to help us endure and carry on. As I speak the names of friends and colleagues who, since we last convened in January 2021, are now ancestors, I invite you to use the chat to speak forth the names of those you wish to remember and honor. I will pour libation in remembrance. Jim Bessman, Nai Ni Chen, John Clark, husband of Anna Steele, Baba Melvin Deal, Bill Fegan, Tamitha Denise Green, Barry Harris, Sarah Jaffe, Chester Lane, husband of Marianne Ciolino, Una Lofgren, Little Richard, Reverend Richard Penniman, Valerie Serpa, Stephen Sondheim, Greg Tate, and George Ween. Let us pause for a moment of silence as we remember those who are now ancestors. Thank you. Before we get to our keynote, I want to take this opportunity to thank the APAP staff for their relentless push to the finish line. We are a strong team of dedicated professionals, good friends, and I am so proud of each and every one of you. Thank you, APAP. Thank you to our staff. And now It is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Ben Cameron. Ben is the president of the Jerome Foundation in St. Paul, Minnesota. Ben was program director for the arts at Doris Duke Charitable Foundation from 2006 to 2015, where during his tenure, the foundation created the Doris Duke Artists Awards and received the National Medal of the Arts from President Barack Obama. He previously served as the executive director of the Theater Communications Group, as the senior program officer for the Dayton Hudson Foundation, and manager of community relations for Target stores, and as the director of the theater program at the National Endowment for the Arts. Ben received an MFA from Yale School of Drama, a BA with honors from UNC Chapel Hill, and is a recipient of 3 honorary degrees. He currently serves on the board of directors for the Minnesota Council on Foundations. Please, let's give a warm welcome to Ben.
Lisa, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you virtually from sub-zero Minnesota, which is, of course, the unceded lands of the Dakota people, whose ancestors and peoples of present and future I wish to acknowledge and honor. You know, I've been lucky enough at various points in my career to have different relationships with arts presenters, colleague, co-convener, honoree, grantee, but in every case, I've admired it as an essential part of our national landscape and as a leader, whether under Susie Farr, who was CEO when first I encountered it, or Sandra Gibson, or Mario Garcia Durham, or now the extraordinary, fantastic Lisa Richards Toney. I am deeply, deeply honored to be with all of you today. You know, each of us probably has our own sense of what a keynote should be. My own goal both is to celebrate the moment in which we find ourselves and to challenge our collective assumptions about the future. So as such, my role is to be cheerleader and provocateur, and I feel confident that at some point I'm going to say something that offends or even enrages some of you. Nevertheless, I'm going to ask over our next 40 minutes together that we together walk the 4-step path of creativity, as defined by Angela Zarian when she says creativity is showing up, really showing up, senses vibrating, listening deeply, speaking the truth, and letting go of predetermined results. You know, as a first step, we should again, as Lisa and Renae have already done, begin in celebration, acknowledging that, to paraphrase the late Stephen Sondheim, we got through all of last year and we're here. Look who's here. We're still here. Something we could not have taken for granted 22 months ago, and no small accomplishment given the deeply painful and challenging journeys you've endured. Those of you with organizations, whether that's for-profit or nonprofit, whether presenter or manager or producer, you've often laid off staff, you've suspended programming, you've entered that labyrinthine world of government relief initiatives. Those of you who are artists have seen commitments canceled, debts accrued, day jobs lost, and with them the benefits that you needed for medical coverage. And many of you in both groups, confronted with plunging income, have been forced to give up office space or studio space or home space and relocate, especially if you had been based in rent-high locations like New York and San Francisco. And just as we've all begun to reemerge and recommit to restaff and restructure and reopen, we've been thrust backwards again in an especially cruel reversal of fortunes by a surging reappearance of a new strain of virus. You know, that said, even while we've all been deeply shaped by this COVID crisis, I would contend that the ultimate impact of these past 22 months will be less about COVID than it will be about the other pandemics for which we have no Moderna or Pfizer. The pandemic of misinformation, the pandemic of political polarization and mutual political contempt, the pandemic of violence and intimidation as an appropriate political tactic for which January 6th may have been just the first trial run. The posidemic, a term I'm coining to suggest that at least this one's positive, unlike the preceding ones, which to me are all negative. The posidemic of long overdue racial reckoning and the call for racial justice and racial equity. Long after COVID has faded from our memory, it will be these pan and posidemics that will shape our children, our communities, our nation, our lives, and which must be at the center of our attention in moving forward. In speeches I've done of late, I've been posing 3 questions to consider as we move toward that future. Question 1, what is the dominant mindset that's shaping our return? You know, many of us, whether artists or managers, producers, or organizational leaders, are likely to have seen these last 22 months as an interruption. And much of our energy has been spent surviving, laying the groundwork so that we can reopen our offices, that we can restaff, we can recast, we can get back to the studios and create and convene again, and to do what we did before and give audiences transformative experiences in music or theater or dance in a triumphant resumption and return. And if in 2019 you were seeing annual growth in audiences, consistent growth beyond a season in which you had a mega hit like Hamilton or Phantom, that's a whole different topic. If your paid percentage of house were annually rising, if your donor base were increasing, if you were seeing positive movement and engaging younger and more diverse audiences, diverse racially, generationally, economically, in gender and in political point of view, if as artists you are more and more in demand for your talent, and if as producers or managers you are finding tour bookings increasing more and more, then yes, COVID was an interruption to your success. And yes, recovery and resumptions may be an appropriate goal for you, even while I would remind you the world to which you are returning is not identical to the world you left behind. But I have to say, those financials were not typical of most of you or the larger fields, which were in hard, difficult moments even before COVID appeared. In FY19, as we know, income was rising primarily by increasing ticket prices rather than by increases in attendance. The average paid percentage of house was typically stuck, as it had been for 5 years, at 60 to 63%, a percentage my teachers in school would have said was a D- or an F. State funding was declining. Entire fields as a whole had negative working capital. Artists were being asked to assume higher and higher shares of touring costs, to sacrifice more and more of their royalties, to spend more and more of their time in additional day jobs, and to see wages that were rarely keeping pace with inflation. Even the most financially healthy organizations were offsetting losses through investment gains in an historically robust stock market, which of course will not last forever and cannot be a viable annual strategy. If those negative pressures were true for you, whether in whole or in part, if you were increasingly struggling to make ends meet, if your audiences and giving were stagnant or falling, if the people who were coming through your doors were looking grayer and grayer, or in my case, balder and balder, with each passing year, and were still reflective of only one small slice of your community, why should you be trying to resume and repeat? Might you instead be considering reinventing a process that will begin not by looking in at what you need to survive, but by looking out at what your community needs in this moment and to which you might attach yourself? A perspective and a viewpoint that's less about excellence or history or perpetuity or survival than about ongoing relevance. You know, clearly resuming or reinventing is not a both and. It is a both and not an either or. But consciously calibrating this continuum of return versus reinvention, who that will involve, what this will involve, what programming will be, how resources will be deployed, how quickly you will move. These are all critical strategic decisions that warrant your immediate attention. Question 2, how are we positioning ourselves for the next disruption? Look, we don't know what lies ahead, but we do know that disruptions are having greater and greater impact and happening with greater and greater frequency. We do know that COVID is not a standalone event and that there will be a comparable crisis ahead, whether that's from another new COVID strain or another new disease, whether it's from disruptions of climate change, of fire or earthquakes or floods, or whether it's from the impact of terrorism, whether domestic or international or cyber, just to name a few potential sources. How now are we building our capacity not merely to endure periodic but escalating disruption and destabilization? Are we trying to achieve stability to withstand changes in the world? Or are we trying to build the nimbleness and resilience that will allow us to be adaptable, whatever the future may bring? Serious pursuit of adaptability requires, of course, careful financial planning, generally living within our means, however meager those means may feel. It demands annual surplus budgeting, not deficit budget, not even break-even budgeting. Budgets that at the minimum cost represent all costs, plus future inflation, plus creating or augmenting reserves, pursued through diverse revenue streams. But resilience is driven not just or even possibly first by money, it's driven instead by deep and conscious cultivation of an internal culture. A culture that explicitly connects goals and strategies to the external world, a culture with the discipline to make data-based decisions, a culture where staffs engage in cross-siloed thinkings and connect meaningfully, not only internally with each other, but externally with outside organizations and communities beyond their four walls. And a culture where, most importantly, and frankly, where few of us spend too little time, a culture where we dedicate conscious time to reflective thinking. Even while we're reeling from these last 2 years, ignoring the importance of resilience and thinking about the future without assuming we will be comparably disrupted again will almost certainly, I would suggest to you, spell our doom. And question 3, how are we preparing for the fundamental revolution in our internal cultures that lies ahead? When I look out, I see 2 major overlapping but not identical tsunamis that are engulfing all of us today. The call to racial equity has been the more visible one in the past 2 years. The murder of George Floyd, literally blocks away from where I'm sitting today, finally has made basic structural racial injustice and inequity impossible to ignore. And in every dimension of our society, from housing to policing to wealth polarization to education to the arts and more, the necessity to think differently, believe differently, behave differently has never been more urgent. And for many of you, this is not new. This has been your fundamental reason to exist, and you have persevered and fought and triumphed, even while the larger world has often failed to give you the credit or the visibility or especially the resources you've deserved. At last, for those of you for whom this call is organic and deeply rooted, organized foundations at least are beginning to recalibrate an historic imbalance in access to resources. They are shifting their attention in your direction, embracing priorities of racial equity, not as ancillary or incidental, but as primary, prioritizing BIPOC leaders, BIPOC organizations, and BIPOC community needs and artists at last. Many others of you are only now beginning to confront your own culpability in contributing consciously or unconsciously to unjust and inequitable systems, and are now making your first commitments to racial justice, whether in the nascent stages of planning and discussion or already publicly repositioning, announcing seasons and artists, hiring new staff, and engaging leaders that are far different from those of the past. With the imminent return of audiences, we are about to see how our communities respond, whether audiences are going to grow in response to these changes as we hope and need them to do, or whether in the short term they will depart. A moment that in turn is quickly going to reveal who has embraced racial equity as a core purpose, knowing that inequity and injustice have been instilled for generations and will take years to dismantle, versus those who have embraced these goals solely for rhetorical convenience and PR and are likely to abandon the cause. Foundations, I have to say, are increasingly indifferent to rhetoric, no matter how inspiring. It is overdue time, to hear not good intentions, but to see demonstrated achievement in programming, in board and staff composition, in executive compensation, in the myriad ways you exercise the power you have to support BIPOC artists and vendors and consultants and surrender your space to community groups and more. And in the case of the largest and historically most financially stable among you, many foundations, frankly, are going to find that your resource base, your scale of programming, and the opulence of your facilities may be active disincentives to support you further. Racial reckoning and recalibration is upon us, but it is, however, only one of the two tsunamis at hand. The other, a sister tsunami of generational change and division that are promising to wreak havoc for many. Working cross-generationally, indeed, is proving for many to be the source of greatest pressure that you feel today as you struggle to reconcile a generation attuned to traditional aesthetics, specialization, siloed departments, deference to superiors and supervisors, gradual change, and acceptance of lower wages in recognition of nonprofit purpose and calling, with a new generation that is invested in radically new aesthetic forms, used to transcending silos, rejecting supervision, insisting on immediate change, saddled by student debt, surrounded by contemporaries in dot-coms with seven-figure salaries, and unwilling to work in a nonprofit industry that has been predicated on discounted labor, and where the largest charitable sector has always been and will continue to be not government philanthropy, private philanthropy, corporate, or even individual giving, but the artists, the managers, and administrators on whose lives the work is made. In this moment, our largest challenges in our society at large, as well as in the arts in particular, may lie not in programming or financing, but in reinventing the ways we relate to one another and live together. Diversifying our organizations, whether racially or generationally, is more complex than simply seating new bodies in old chairs. It is the starting point for hard and vulnerable and painful conversations about how we treat and have treated one another. Conversations that demand we are honest and rigorous and yet generous to each other. That we model internally the dynamics and civic dignity we wish to instill in our communities at large as we determine together what it is we believe and how we will work and what we hope the impact of our work will be. This is a crucible moment for each of us. And I know many of you are exhausted, you are discouraged, you are just starting to come back, and now you are having to shutter your doors and suspend your tours again. And Lord knows you wanted to be together, not online, but with one another at the Hilton on 54th, to be in that ballroom or in small meeting rooms and to sit together at Under the Radar or Exponential or Prototype, to dance together at Global Fest, and to share late night conversations at the bar and in cabs en route to the airport. Many of you here today are bone weary, and you are looking at the rising number of people in your community who are leaving their jobs in all industries and wondering whether you too should be quitting yours and saying no to more of the same, to embark instead on a different path that may be more lucrative or nourishing or just more humane. And I'm not going to say don't go. In fact, I'm going to say if the future is likely to be harder and more exhausting and more frustrating than the last 2 years, and if this is simply just too much, I am so grateful for everything you have given and done. And I wish you nothing but happiness and fulfillment in whatever direction life takes you. But if you decide to stay, as I hope you will, we need you to be all in, a level of commitment that you can reach only if you ground yourself and surround yourself with others who share your artistic purpose, your civic purpose, and your spiritual purpose. You know, artistic purpose has been the primary source of commitment for many of us throughout our careers. Frankly, it's probably the reason that we're all here. At some point in our lives, we sat in a darkened performing arts center or a church or a cafetorium, for those of you who remember such things. And as the lights came on, we saw a swan flutter on stage from the wings, or we heard a swell of voices raised in song, or as in my case, we sat upright as a human voice began to speak, and our lives were changed. We are driven by our love for the arts, and we measure our success more meaningfully, not in ticket sales, but in the quality of the artistic encounter, however we perceive it and however measured. Whether for you that means artistic virtuosity or the ability to animate an audience to frenzied response, or to inspire joy or contemplation, or to lead people beyond witnessing to creating works of their own in a world of deeper arts participation. But our work must also carry a civic purpose, an additional dimension that invites us to expand beyond our traditional focus on excellence and to additionally assess our ongoing relevance. Now, especially, is the moment we have to repeatedly ask ourselves, what is the value of our work for our communities? What is the value of our fields for our communities? How would our communities be damaged if they were deprived not just of our groups, but if they were deprived of dance and theater and music tomorrow? Measuring civic value can be tracked on a lot of planes. We've heard about the economic argument of leveraged dollars for local economy, or the impact of arts education in promoting intellectual development, and especially the role the arts play in building empathy and discouraging racist behavior. But the most vibrant organizations I've seen over the last 2 years when stages went dark were the ones who were far from frustrated or inactive, and who instead leaned ever more and more heavily into civic life and civic purpose. Here in Minneapolis and St. Paul, for example, Mixed Blood Theater, which when performances ceased, transformed its space to be a temporary food shelf for communities in distress, and in water stations and Wi-Fi centers for protesters mourning the death of George Floyd. Or Penumbra Theater of St. Paul, which under the inspired leadership of Sarah Bellamy is repositioning itself as the Penumbra Center for Racial Healing, tackling issues of community pain and environmental justice and criminal justice in ways and methodology that go far beyond production. Wonderful artistic organizations, but now grounded not just in artistic purpose, but civic purpose as well. And especially in the arts, we must be clear in our spiritual purpose, as Lisa has already modeled for us this morning. Spiritual purpose grounded in core values. What is our higher purpose? What is the moral and ethical strand that unites us? Not only being precise, but openly and visibly proclaiming these internally and externally about the 2 or 3 values that will permeate our organization will be the unifying mortar that will bind your staff across generations and race. It will give you direction. It will attract audiences who may never have crossed your threshold before. Poll after poll show that people will pay higher prices in interest of aligning with values. And no, at the reverse end, I am never going to eat at a Chick-fil-A, no matter how delicious or good it may be. And young people especially want to devote their lives to higher purpose. Especially in times of crisis, it is values, clarity, and purpose that promote nimbleness and direction. Anecdotally, I have to say, the organizations that are in greatest disarray are often crystal clear about their mission, but they are in rampant disagreement about what their values are and how their purpose is defined. The future requires us to be crystal clear about spiritual values and purpose, and to place them above traditional mission if we hope to thrive. You know, in 2014, long before COVID, I heard President Scott Cohen from Tulane University talk about what it meant to come back to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, a city that was decimated physically, socially, spiritually. His university, long a leader in higher education, was desperate to reunite, to reconnect to its past, to return and to resume to its longstanding mission of being a center for learning and reflection. At the same time, Cohen said, nothing in our mission required us to go beyond our own walls, to reach out to the surrounding community, to roll up our sleeves and get our hands dirty to rebuild a city in deep, deep distress and pain. And so Cohen said, and I love this, I chose to ignore the mission and instead to require without debate every student, every course, every department, every facet of the university to add a public service component to rebuild the city. Business students counseled startups, engineers tackled constructions, philosophy majors, this is my favorite, they were the first to protest. They were saying, we're philosophy majors, what the hell should we do? They worked to rebuild education, knowing they knew how to debate complex ideas and started debate clubs in every surrounding high school. There were some resistant faculty who moved on. Others were frankly marginalized. But in the wake of new purpose, applications grew, retention rates grew, graduation rates grew, contributions grew, community grew, Tulane grew. In this current moment of deep division and deep distress, our communities are begging us to roll up our sleeves. You know, for my own part, I am deeply optimistic about our future, even while I know I haven't sounded so until now. For I believe the value of the arts has never been more crucial as our communities look for paths of generosity and rigor and reconciliation that we will need as we try to reach each other across fractious and acrimonious social and political divides. I continue to be deeply inspired by a book I read called The 5%, Finding Solutions to Seeming Impossible Conflicts. You know, the author Peter Coleman notes that 5% of our problems as a society are what he calls intractable. They're places where we're divided and we get stuck and we just can't find our way out. The Middle East, he says, may be an intractable problem. Abortion rights may be an intractable problem. Gun control may be an intractable problem, and the list goes on. But in looking at these, Coleman says that intractable problems, however different they are, have three basic similarities. Intractable problems are subsumed in a competitive win-lose, winner-take-all dynamic. Complex issues are reduced and oversimplified to sound bites, and participants surround themselves with feedback loops that reinforce their initial point of view no matter what's been said in the interim. As apt a description of the current Congress of the United States as any I can imagine. I believe in every fiber of my being that the arts offer us the alternative to intractability. Instead of competition, we operate in a context of cooperation. It's how the work is made, whether cooperation of artist to artist in rehearsal and performance, or of artist and audience in sharing it, of audience to audience in shaping its reception and impelling it forward. Instead of sound bites and oversimplification, we traffic in nuance, subtlety, shades of gray. And at our best, our very best, rather than self-reinforcing feedback loops that confirm what we think we knew, we gather people unlike each other to view our fellow human beings with generosity and curiosity. God knows if we have ever needed that capacity in human history, we need it now. Whatever your field or discipline, it is the time to proclaim and maximize not only the value of the product you present, but the social experience that you uniquely offer, the experience that calls us together to delve more deeply into ourselves while we sit together and connect to one another in ways that our home entertainment centers or Netflix or YouTube cannot. Many of you are going to choose to gather and be a rallying place for people of like beliefs and values to come together, a place where injustice and wrong, however that is defined, can be called out. And while some may worry this is preaching to the choir, as it were, the choir is with you because they need the message, not just because they want to hear themselves sing. Others will choose to be a place to bring people together to encounter and genuinely express and explore difference and call in something that is possible only if you are genuinely interested in another's point of view and you're not trying to attract different audiences just so you can tell them how wrong they are. A path that requires openness, true curiosity, grace, vulnerability, and imagination. And yet others of you will choose not to confront manifest issues at all, but simply to call together, to remind ourselves as we sit with people with whom we deeply disagree of the power of laughing together or crying together, cheering together, or sitting in shocked silence together, of conspiring, one of my favorite words, which in Latin means to breathe together, to breathe the same air, an important step toward repairing our social fabric, which is increasingly frayed. It is not just our artistic power, but our social power to which I'm committed because I have seen it, I have lived it, I have heard it from audiences themselves, and I believe that it unites us with people we do not know and from whom we may be very different in a common quest for greater good. And for all of the agony of this moment, I think we are on the cusp, not only of strengthening many of the systems and organizations we have today, but of creating an entirely new system altogether, something deeply and genuinely new. Just as many of our organizations sprang up in the 50s or 60s or 70s to make a path where there had been none before. And yeah, we're going to have to earn it, whatever that path is. My only regrets are that I'm both too old to be part of this journey and that I profoundly miss in this moment the giant mind of the late Sam Miller, who was the one among us who could always imagine more than any of us thought possible and instrumentalize it in practical ways to make it come true. Together, both through strengthening the best of our current system and by creating something genuinely new, together, we will call into being a future that is more wonderful and richer and more nourishing artistically, civically, and spiritually than the world in which we meet today. I salute all of you who are going to create and earn this future. All of you, not only as presenters and artists and managers and producers and more, but as social activists pledged to a world of equity and justice, compassion, and hope. I promise you my hand is outstretched in friendship if I can ever be of help to you in any way at any time. And I thank you for your kindness and your patience in your invitation and in listening to me this afternoon. Thank you all and Godspeed. And now let's have a conversation led by the moderator, the great Krista Bradley. Krista.
Let me get my tissues out first. Ben, that was just so brilliant and moving. And we've been watching the chat and people feel completely seen and their hearts are open. And you just undid us all in a way that we needed to feel and be reconnected and realize why we do what we do. So thank you so very much. We have a couple of comments in the chat, and I just want to raise them up. And if you do have questions, folks, for Ben in what he shared, please put them in the comments. But there was one that really stuck with me initially, and it's, so many people are feeling like they're just at survival, and that resilience is not a space where they can be. They can't think about it because they can't support community because they're trying to just make it, and they're canceling tours, now. I wonder what advice you might have for people that are in that space, given all the things that you said.
Yeah. I absolutely appreciate the exhaustion of the moment. And it's real. And I don't want to minimize it in any way. But I've always, and somebody who trained me once said two things that I've always taken to heart. One is, it's terrible when people burn out and leave our field. It's worse when they burn out and stay. And I think part of what we know is in terms of we've all been part of organizations where people have stayed too long. And as I said, at some point, if you've burned out, I respect that and I'm grateful to you for everything you've done. But what I also want to emphasize is burnout and exhaustion are not the same thing. When you are engaged in something you deeply believe in, all things being equal, you can work 18, 20 hours a day and say, baby, bring it on. You're working 3 or 4 hours on something that doesn't connect to your core. You're saying, pass the butter knife, I'm going to open a vein. Burnout is not just exhaustion. Burnout is disconnect from core values. And if you don't know what your core values are, how is it that you possibly can restructure or change your life and your organization and your existence to reconnect with those things that nourish you? Defining your core values I believe that each of us live for 2 or 3 core values. And when I had to determine mine, what I found was really helpful, especially because I believe it's very easy to be noble and declare them and say, oh, I believe in justice, I believe in that, whatever. But what I did for about a month is I just got Post-it notes and I thought, what are the things that haven't merely gratified me, but have nourished me, whether that's been as a funder or as somebody running TCG, or as a really bad actor, which I was, or a theater director, as a romantic partner, as a son, as a student, in every aspect of my life. What are the things where I've been nourished? And after about a month of that, I just put all of those Post-its out on the dining room table. And I said, what do these things have in common? And my core values popped. They were like, if you've ever woven, you can't see the pattern as you're throwing the loom. You can only see the pattern and what's already been woven. And so I would just invite you, if you are feeling burned out, ask yourselves, what are my core values? And does this life afford me the opportunity to reconnect with those? Even if I need to step away from exhaustion for the moment, it's that clarity around values that will help you transcend exhaustion and lead to ultimate nourishment and renewal, I think. Krista, does that help?
That helps so much. And I'm happy to say that we will have lots of opportunities to maybe play with Post-it notes over the course of the week and spend some time not only remembering why and what we do, but taking some time to rest and reflect. So thank you so much for that. There are more kudos and gratitude in the chat, more than questions. So I think that speaks volumes for where people are at. So thank you so much, Ben.
And can I just point out that I changed my name? So now you see my, well, not change my name, but you see my email address now and my identifier. And if I can be of help to anybody and you want to have a correspondence with me, email is the best way to get hold of me. And I'm delighted and look forward to having a conversation with anybody who wants to have one. Whether you have good things to say to me or whether you want to yell and scream and tell me how wrong I am. So.
Always so generous. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, folks and friends, Ben lifted up so many of the themes that we will be delving into throughout the week. There will be opportunities to reflect on our core values and how do we reframe and rethink where we are and what we're doing in our personal and professional lives. And we hope that you'll lean into that. We have lots of opportunities to also just understand where we are at the moment and what kinds of tools and resources can help us navigate the now. We have a lot of that today, and we hope that you'll stay on to be with us this afternoon around where we are with visas and where we are in terms of building resilience for our organization, as well as our wonderful speed dating that we'll be starting today and having for the rest of the week. And our social time together where we can really knit ourselves back up with each other and have a sense of community, even if it's online. I promise lots of fun there. We have 6 days to be with you, and we look forward to seeing you on those days through plenaries and through opportunities to connect socially. I also want to share with you that we've been asking a number of artists to join us both live and on video. And we asked a number of these artists to share with us how they are right now. How are they making work? What's important for them to tell you? What do they think we need to be reminded of? and what do we need to be doing for each other. So we have lots of opportunities to do that, and lots of opportunities to hear various artists, old and new, people that you know, and maybe those that you don't know, but we think that their voices matter. One of those critical voices is someone that many of us know and admire and love. And that is the 2021 MacArthur Fellow Award winner, artistic director, founder, visionary of Urban Bushwoman, Jawole Willa Zollar. And she is here to actually lead us out and share with us some words of wisdom and her perspective about where we are. Jawole.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm really honored to be invited to speak. My description, I am a brown-skinned African-American woman with big red round earrings and a top knot on my head. I am a woman in her 7th decade, and I bring that perspective of being alive and an artist to you. I'm speaking from my heart today, and thank you, Ben. It was so much richness there. I am on the land of the Lenape, the unceded land of the Lenape people. And I, as I was, when I was asked to speak, I had been talking to someone the other day, and they were in a lot of despair. And some of the despair was because of just all the uncertainty. I got a positive COVID test, and the next day it was negative, and then I got the PCR, and they said that's not going to come to you until like 9 days. And so all of this kind of craziness over the testing, like what's happening, what isn't happening. And I said, do you remember it used to be that we said, well, we're waiting to see if the rabbit died. And for those of you who are younger, who may not know this reference, it used to be that in order to find out if a person was pregnant or a pregnancy test, you had to kill a rabbit, in essence. And then it became kind of a euphemism of saying I'm pregnant was the rabbit died. Well, we ain't got to kill no rabbits no more, because science and technology have evolved beyond that. And so I do really trust and understand that we will get to a better place on the confusion of the testing and all of this that we're in right now. We're beyond the rabbit dying, and we know that people are dedicated to making this better. So it will get better. I absolutely trust that. And the other thing that I was really thinking about was in that moment when we could go back to see work. And I just ran out the house to go see whatever was close. And I live by BAM, so whatever I could go see. And I've really been reflecting on, we need live performance. It is part of a human culture. It is a need of human culture. The vibratory resonance between audience and performer is absolutely essential to our well-being. And if we didn't need it, it would have evolved into something else a long time ago. But it has been with us for centuries, eons. We need live performance. We need that vibratory resonance that is between audience and performer. It does something. It creates something. And it is absolutely the thing that I have more than anything else missed, not only as a performer, but a person sitting in the audience and feeling that vibration of the live voice, of the bodies moving on stage. It is a real thing. We absolutely have to have this. We need live performance. Film is great, digital is great, but there is a vibratory resonance that is essential to our well-being that only comes from that experience of audience and performer. And that's what we have to trust and lean into, and know that as we have these times where it's been canceled or postponed or away from us, we got to hold on to that. We need that. We have to have it. So therefore it will come back, it will be recreated, and we will rest in that. The other thing I was thinking about, and this is something that I do when I get to the bottom, of despair, and I'm going to believe me, I have been there a lot, then I go to history. And one of the places in history I go to is Nelson Mandela. I think, okay, 27 years, Jawole, 27 years that this man held on to a belief of change, held on to the resistance of standing for change, for a change in South Africa and the world. And I go to that, I think 27 years, okay. I think about my ancestors and my family, people that escaped from enslavement, walked from the South to the Midwest or North. They were walking into the unknown, days, nights. There was no sense of when this is going to end. And I really go back and lean into that, read things or look at things that remind me this is a moment in time where we're in a great unknown. People have persevered through this. And I remind myself, Jawole, you can do this, but you cannot do it alone. You have to do it in community. You have to do it with people, girlfriends, boyfriends, people you know, all that ways that we find ourselves in this human connection, this human need. You cannot do it alone. So whether it's on the phone, on the street, talking to someone. But then lately, I've been even going into really like thinking like, okay, let me just even go beyond that. And I've started just singing. And I've started singing with, maybe it's one other person in my apartment, or I'm dancing and maybe it's one other person. And I'm reading poetry. We're reading poetry back and forth. I gotta get that connection of that human vibration of experience, of performing, of enjoying this expression of culture, this expression of the moment. And that for me is what creates resilience. I think I went back and looked at the very first press release that Urban Bushwomen wrote, that I wrote for Urban Bushwomen, and it finished with that our work is about the struggle, growth, and transformation of the human spirit. We're in it, we're in it. And as the great poet said, I think it was Langston Hughes, but it might have been Paul Laurence Dunbar, somebody will correct me. Life for me ain't been no crystal stair. I grew up in segregation and I've been through some shit. And I know we're going through some shit now. We have each other. We have performance. It will come back in robust ways, in different ways. We have the ways of connecting to that vibratory resonance that we so need from that is so much a part of our human need and our human culture. It is not a luxury. It is absolutely necessary. And that's why we need everyone here, the entire ecosystem of our field, the agents, the managers, the performers, the restaurants that are next to the theater. We need all of that as a part of how we will move forward. We cannot do it alone. So I am so honored again and to be invited to speak with you. I love this field. I love the fact that I'm able to do the thing that I love, no matter how great or small I'm able to do it. I'm still going to do it until I can't do it. So thank you all, and thank you for inviting me to speak. And I look forward to dancing with you, singing with you, seeing live performance with you in the future.
Thank you, Jawole. Thank you so much, and hope that you can join us tonight in our socials APAP hour, where we'll be dancing and singing in community. So thank you so much for that. Thank you all for such a great session and for being here with us today. I hope you're inspired. I hope that you're ready to take on the next step. We want to remind you that you should take breaks, but the Expo Commons is open right now and we want you to visit. The showcases are up and running. Please go visit those as well. And we look forward to seeing you back here at 2:00 Eastern time for our next set of sessions, our 4 o'clock session for speed dating, and our 5:30 APE happy hour. If you're so moved to respond to the survey about this opening session, we would invite you to actually fill that out. And we encourage you to share what you're hearing and learning throughout the conference by using hashtag APAP NYC and tagging APAP on social media. Thank you again for attending. We'll now send you out and see you in a couple of hours. Take care.